Hi to my wolf pack, Charlie Black 20, and today I'm doing another video on the Nuremberg trials, where today what we will be covering is pretty simple. It's going to be a fairly short video, but we are going to be covering the evidence of the trial, the witnesses, and certain amount of cross-examination that happened by the lawyers. So there is one fundamental thing about the Nuremberg trials that we forget today in today's modern hyper-fast technological day, which is that during the Nuremberg trial, what they had was these devices, these headphones, that did simultaneous translation. So the four languages being used, German, French, Russian, English, all had to be translated, and these machines were able to do that with a great amount of accuracy. But the problem is that they made the trial go extremely slowly because you had to wait for the translation to go through in the video, or I'm sorry, in the headphones. And so asking questions and receiving an answer took a few minutes, it seems. And you can go online onto YouTube and you can watch the trials themselves, and they are very slow for what we are used to today. At that time, it was probably a lot faster than what you would expect in a multi-language trial. And so one of the things is that people asked at the time, where's the evidence? What evidence do you need to convict these guys or to try them? And one of the things the Allies, especially the Americans, had in their possession, I wrote this down. The Allies had over 110,000 captured German documents that were examined for this trial. A total of 4,600 of those were used in the trial as evidence. Out of all that, that's all they used in the trial as evidence. I mean, wow. And again, this is for 22 defendants and 6 organizations. That's it. That is a lot of evidence. But that also means that these prosecutors are relying on documents to convict the Nazi leadership, which for a legal standpoint is absolutely crucial. If you can get documents with their signatures, with their orders, with their beliefs, with their basically the smoking gun of that trial is these documents, you're basically killing defendants with their own words. The problem with that is that it's not entertaining. It is not something that grabs the public's attention, because all you're doing is reading a document, entering it into evidence. Maybe you might have somebody challenge the document from the defense, but a lot of these defendants, for the most part, they said, no, the documents are accurate. Yes, that's my signature. The Allies, at one point, to keep the press around and to get public attention back on the trial, they did this. They introduced witnesses and film and pictures. Now, for the witnesses, the defense actually asked for witnesses too. For the prosecution, they had 37 witnesses for the prosecution, whereas the defense, plus not counting the defendants, had 83. As well as the photos that were entered into evidence, over 25,000 photographs, and, as I said, film, 19 miles worth of film. 19 miles worth of film. Wow. And so, at that point, having the witnesses describe the cruelties and the horrors of what they endured, as well as witnesses for the defense being destroyed by the prosecution, it really brought a change in tone to the trial. And in particular, when the film on Nazi concentration camps was shown. Now, if you go on YouTube, you can find these videos. I'm not going to put any of them here. And I do want to put an asterisk on this. The videos that were shown were the liberation of the camps in the West. Those that were in France, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany especially. The camps that were liberated in the East were on different film held by the Soviets. And those will be another topic. Those will be another thing I'll bring up in a bit. But when that film was shown to the audience, the press, and the defense and the defendants, it really showed everyone just how bad the Nazis were. And then the defendants, they really knew at that point that they were in a lot of real trouble, because none of them denied that horrible things had happened, but they always said that it was in the context of a war. But these concentration camps and their liberation and the cruelties that were heard and seen on those films and by the witnesses really showed the world just how bad the Nazis were. As well as the film showing the quote-unquote trials of the July 20 bomb plotters, where the Germans of the Wehrmacht, of the resistance, were brought before these special courts, the people's courts, and basically railroaded, not even given a semblance of a defense, just told that they were guilty, berating them, calling them traitors, and then being taken out and executed. And when the defendants saw that, they realized what kind of a trial they were getting right then and there versus what they meted out to their own people. Then you also had the testimony of a French resistance fighter, Marie-Claude Vaillant Couturier, and she was a survivor of Auschwitz. She had been a communist, fought in the resistance, been captured by the Gestapo and tortured, and then she and a few hundred other French women, are sent by train to Auschwitz. And she describes the horrors of the camp, as well as just the trip, which was full of its own horror, and how many people came back versus how many went. And it's pretty horrific compared to what you can read. You had a Soviet surprise during the trial. They tried to enter in a document, a confession by Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, the man who had led the German 6th Army at Stalingrad and had surrendered to the Soviets. And they tried to enter in a document with his confession and his testimony. The defense of the defendants, they objected because Paulus wasn't there to. They needed the person himself to be there to authenticate it and to verify it and the contents of the document. And to everyone's surprise, the Soviets said, well, guess what? We'll bring Paulus in tomorrow morning. And the entire courtroom was like, what? How? Nobody knew that the Soviets had managed to bring Friedrich Paulus in without anybody knowing. And so Paulus was a POW, so he wasn't on trial. And he gave testimony. It sounded very rehearsed, like the Soviets had kind of given him what he needed to say. And the defense cross-examined him, and he kept saying he couldn't remember certain things and that there were timetables he didn't remember. But the one thing they could not shake him on was the fact that this campaign into Russia had been launched with the express purpose to destroy the Russian people and to take the Russian land and destroy communism by wiping out the entire system, the entire people. He never strayed from that. But that was the last surprise the Soviets would bring, because they then showed a film that they had of what had happened on the Eastern Front, where they show the liberations of the camps they find. Most of them are death camps, as well as just the horrors on the Eastern Front, where the German army had been given special orders by Hitler to his generals, who disseminated them down to the ranks, that said that none of the rules of war apply in the areas of the East. So the rules of war that were followed against the Allies like Britain, France, and America did not need to be followed in Russia and its puppet states. So anything that the German soldier wanted to do against the Russian people, they could do. No threat of punishment. They could do whatever they wanted. Wholesale. No punishments. Not every German general agreed with this. In fact, I believe there was at least one who countermanded that order and said it won't happen under his watch. But the majority, the vast majority, hemmed and hawed, or they just went along. They had a written order called the Commissar Order, which Hitler had signed and Keitel had signed, that said that they were to treat this as worse than the Mongol hordes did against their enemies when they fought back. So the horrors on the Eastern Front are shown in this film, and none of the defendants can watch the film. They all just break down. Except Goering. Hermann Goering, he just pretends to read a book and pretends to be bored. Doesn't even look at the screen. And you had the testimony of two Nazi leaders that were not on trial then and there. One, Otto Ohlendorf. He was the commander of an Einsatzgruppen. These were action groups. That was the translation. And the job of these Einsatzgruppen, when they went into Poland and into Russia especially, was to follow behind German armies, round up any Jews, gypsies, and political enemies, quote unquote, and kill them, murder them, wholesale, especially Jews. And at first it started out as military age males, and it quickly expanded to men, women, and children. All of them. The old, the sick. They would find a spot, usually some kind of landscape that was either secluded or easy to dig pits or a ravine, and they would... Otto Ohlendorf, he described very calmly what his Einsatzgruppen would do. They would gather up all the Jews, tell them to show up at a certain time, tell them that they had to or they would be shot. Then they would drive them to a designated spot, force them all to undress and give up all their belongings, any valuables they had, at a prepared ditch, and shoot them with firing squads, killing them one at a time. And they killed sorry this was known as the Holocaust of Bullets. Over 1.5 million Jews were killed by these Einsatzgruppen and reserve police battalions and other units that were locals of the areas. They introduced gas vans to try and relieve the strain on the German soldiers who were doing the killings, and that didn't work, but it gave the idea for the death camps. Ollendorf said that his official count was 90,000 Jews and Gypsies that his Einsatzgruppen unit, of which he was the leader, executed, liquidated. And he said that maybe that number was a little high because the men would like to brag. And when he was asked about did he feel any humanity for these people, he said, well, of course I felt humanity for my men. Using the gas vans was hard on my men. Handling the bodies after they were driven to us with gas, killed with gas, handling the bodies was tough on them. And sometimes the victims were, the dead were still alive. I preferred the shootings for my men because I also didn't allow my men to use brutal methods. Like some men in other units would slam infants' heads into trees. I never allowed my men to do that. I told them that he said that when a mother was holding their infants, he would tell the women, his men would tell the women to hold the baby close to their hearts so that the German soldiers would aim at the infant, kill the infant and the mother with one shot, be more merciful, and save ammunition. Ollendorf testified to this, completely free of his own admission. And the next Nazi witness, was a man who had not been available at the beginning of the trial. His name was Rudolf Höss, not to be confused with Hess, Rudolf Höss, who in 1940 had been given command of the political prisoner camp known as Auschwitz. And soon he received orders to turn his camp into a death camp. And he gave his testimony after he had been captured by the British. He had been given a lot of rough treatment under the British when he was first captured, but he testified freely and even bragged in many ways about how his camp was the best, like by padding the numbers of how many he killed. And he testified that when he went to Treblinka to see how it operated so he could learn how to turn Auschwitz into the best death camp possible, he said he wasn't impressed because it was taking them too long to kill too few. So he expanded Auschwitz, brought in Zyklon B, as he called it, Zyklon B, a poison gas that is used to kill lice, and they would use it at Auschwitz to kill humans. Anybody who came through the camp was in danger. They would have doctors and others select the strong that could do work and send them to slave labor, and the rest would be sent to the gas chambers immediately, after they had been stripped of all their belongings, valuables, even their hair. Höss claimed that his camp killed 2.5 million people, and another 500,000 died of starvation and disease that was not under his jurisdiction. That he was very disappointed about that. In reality, it's shown that Höss probably exaggerated that number because he wanted to look good. He was still trying to be the best death camp commandant he could be. And he also enriched himself at Auschwitz by stealing. All the money that was taken from the victims was supposed to go to the Reich. Him and his staff enriched themselves very much off of the stolen goods. that was how the trial was going. And in the next video, I will discuss how the cross-examination of the defendants goes, how the defendants' strategies were used, or how they used strategies to defend themselves, and how that worked out for them. So, take care, my wolf pack.